Hello, I'm Tim Lawton, and I thought I'd give you an update on what's been going on this week in a mammoth session of debating the Brexit bill. We've just finished 2 days of debate, no fewer than 20 votes. That completes 250 hours of debate in Parliament so far on this bill, so nobody complained that it hasn't been debated enough. Can I say how grateful I am to those many constituents who've emailed me to say that I must vote in favour of the amendments for the Lords, or I must vote against the amendments for the Lords. Those people have written to me to say I must back Brexit and make sure we get on with it, or I must reverse Brexit and make sure it never happens, or we must have a second referendum, or urging me to resist having a second referendum. Those who want me to get rid of the Prime Minister, and those of me who want to support the Prime Minister. So it's not an easy job being an MP, but anyway, I've stood up for what I believe in, and I've also represented the result from the referendum, which did, whether you like it or not, did vote to leave, and that was also the result in the East Worthing and Shoreham constituents. I have resisted changing this bill to any great degree because I'm concerned that the more conditions we put in the Brexit bill, the more it will bind the hand of the government and our negotiators, who are still in the process of getting that deal with the EU that will take us out of the EU from March of next year. There have been some improvements to this bill, and on some specialist issues which I've strongly supported, for example, there have been some success. I'm really pleased to say that the government has agreed that we should widen the terms on which we can take unaccompanied asylum-seeking children to mirror what's called the Dublin III regulations under the EU. That's something I proposed amendments on, and I'm really pleased, for the sake of really vulnerable children fleeing from civil war and other tragedies around the world, that it's easier for us to offer them safe haven here. I think that's a real improvement. And there have been some other measures around the environment, again, which I think have improved the bill. But at times this debate has actually sounded as though it was before the referendum. It sounds as though we're debating whether or not we should have a referendum and whether or not we should come in or come out. Well, whatever your position is, the public voted to leave the EU, and this bill is all about how we make that a reality in terms of UK legislation. I think I'm getting a bit fed up of people telling me, oh, well, people didn't vote for this, people didn't vote to come out of the single market or customs union or whatever. Well, the EU is the customs union. It is the single market. It is having the European Court as the highest legal authority. And if we stayed in the single market, it would mean we would still have free movement of people. We could not have any restrictions for people coming from EU countries into our country in the future. People rejected that. We want to have control of who comes in and out of our country from the EU and the rest of the world. There's this whole quite complicated debate about a customs union. If we stayed in the customs union, it means we are not allowed to do any trade deals with the rest of the world. The EU at the moment has trade deals in place with fewer than 10% of the world's economies. They have lots of trade deals with smaller countries, very few with the big economies like China and India and America that we absolutely need to do business with in the future. We must have that freedom to negotiate our own trade deals, and also staying in the customs union means that collecting tariffs, where at the moment some 4/5 of those tariffs are then paid to Brussels. That's not what we voted for, so we cannot stay in the customs union as it stands. We will have some form of customs arrangement with the EU, but we cannot stay in the customs union. So that's actually what voting to leave the EU means. So we had an awful lot of people coming up with a great load of problems and why we shouldn't do this and shouldn't do that. I'm actually more interested in how we are now going to bring about our exit from the EU, because it's going to happen. We've got to make sure it happens in a way that best advantages the UK and means we can continue to have a constructive, friendly and productive relationship with the EU, our closest neighbour, in the future. Now is the time for us all to realise there is not going to be a second vote. We will be leaving the EU in March of next year. There is serious work still to be done, and at times I've been frustrated that the government hasn't got on with it sooner and perhaps been more forceful, but there is serious work still to be done as to exactly the terms of our relationship with the EU after March of next year. But we now all need to come together to realise that, rally around the government to get that best possible deal that we can for the UK going forward. I've always been clear about my view. I absolutely respect the views of the large number of my constituents who voted to remain in the EU, but that didn't happen, and we now need to make sure that we end up with the UK outside of the EU, but with the best possible relationship with the EU and the best possible prospects for developing our relationships with the 6.9 billion people in the rest of the world who happen not to be within the EU as it stands. What's also a bit frustrating is the whole time we seem to be criticising the UK and the UK government for not having secured a deal so far or being clear on the terms of that deal. Well, it takes two to tango, and actually the EU has spent an awful lot of the time saying computer says no to many of the suggestions we've come up with. And I do hope we can also urge the EU negotiators to realise that whether they like it or not, we are leaving the EU, and we need to have a constructive, pragmatic and practical relationship going forward. So for goodness sake, let's just realise the reality and get on with coming up with something which is to our mutual benefit, which is what it's all about. That's my position. I made it clear. I contributed to the debate. It's always been consistent. I will continue to listen and to respect the varying opinions of all my constituents, but as you can see, I'm never going to please everybody all of the time.